Module 2. Inclusive Education. Possibilities and Difficulties. Millions of children around the world are not in school, often because they are judged to be too different. The basis of the exclusion may be gender, nationality, religion, or disability. In this module, we'll be looking specifically at disability and how disabled children are excluded from schooling. We argue that an inclusive schooling system not only makes sense for disabled children, but it also has a profound effect on the wider community in which it's located. During the second module, we invite you to join in discussions about what inclusion can look like in your environment. What immediate steps are possible, even if there are no big budgets or specially trained facilitators? How can you incorporate a wide diversity of learners in your own school? Ask questions and offer suggestions. Share experiences and pose problems. We want this module to be useful to anyone who is frustrated by the barriers to learning that face our children. Part 1. Barriers to Learning and Challenges. Topics of Part 1. Importance of providing inclusive education to achieve equal opportunities for all. Possible barriers to learning. Inclusive schools, its benefits and features. Task. Listen to Judith Mackenzie. She considers barriers to children learning and how inclusive education approaches can be responsive. Do the exercises in Modul.
Inclusive education is about diversity as the one thing we all have in common. Unfortunately, society has not always dealt well with diversity, and this has created barriers to learning for children who do not meet some kind of norm that is favored within the system. So a barrier to learning is defined as anything that stands in the way of a child being able to learn and to participate on an equal basis with their peers. Any child can experience barriers to learning and participation at any time of their lives. Barriers can be created by the education system itself. For example, many countries may have large class sizes, an inflexible curriculum, and a lack of resources. There are also societal and environmental barriers, such as extreme poverty, abuse, or neglect. A child who is hungry cannot concentrate. She will be sleepy and dull. A child who is living with domestic or gang violence or who receives very little caring adult attention struggles to focus. A child who cannot see may be excluded from learning how to read print material. A child could experience one or many of these barriers to learning. So inclusive education is an approach that seeks to address all these various barriers to learning and to enable children to reach their potential. This is a big challenge and calls upon us to be open toward changing attitudes, behavior, teaching methodologies, curricula, and the environment to meet the needs of all learners. If we do so, we can empower learners by developing their individual strengths and enabling them to participate actively in the process of learning. Inclusive education maximizes participation and minimizes barriers to learning. Inclusive education asserts the right to education for all children, and this right is expressed in international conventions and statements. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child from 1989 speaks to this right for all children and makes specific mention of children with disabilities in Article 23. The Salamanca Statement was developed through broad consultation by UNICEF, and although this happened over 20 years ago, it still offers guiding principles for inclusive education, stating that this education for children with disabilities can only happen within education systems that acknowledge and cater for diversity in its broadest sense. This requires identifying diverse needs in the learning environment and acknowledging the right to education of all children, recognizing that all children can learn and all children and youth need some support. An inclusive education system acknowledges, accepts, and respects differences in learners, whether due to age, gender, ethnicity, language, class, disability, or HIV.
Task. Listen to Ron McConkie. He describes inclusive schools and defines their features. Do the exercises in Modul. Comment on the following question. Will my children with disabilities be best served by attending an inclusive mainstream school?
Inclusive schools acknowledge and honour the right of all children to education. No child is turned away. The teachers are committed to adapting their training to suit the children's needs and different speeds of learning. They endeavour to encourage the full participation of all learners in the life of the school. And schools aim to build learning communities in which parents and local community people play an active part in promoting the holistic development of all the children. And likewise, learners respect each other and provide assistance rather than ridicule when their peers need extra help. So in summary, inclusive education means schools changing their attitudes and practices to suit the needs of the learners in that particular community. This will not be easy. Schools face many challenges in making their schools more inclusive. Lack of money and resources are only part of the problem. Rather, the attitudes and expectations of parents, of teachers, and of learners themselves need to change. Parents need to overcome the stigma of disability and advocate for their child to attend the same school as their brothers and sisters. Teachers need training in how they can adapt the curriculum to the needs of individual children and be given the permission to make those adaptations. The leadership of head teachers and school boards is essential in creating a new vision and purpose for their school. And change must also occur within the wider education system so that schools receive better advice, guidance and support with the inevitable difficulties they will encounter in enrolling and maintaining all learners within the school.
Task. Listen to Judith McKenzie. She tells about Paul with Down syndrome and his learning. Tell about 2 more children with special educational needs you know. Answer the questions suggested by Judith. Do the exercises in Modul.
You may have responded to those statements about disability by thinking about somebody that you know with a disability. I'd like to take this a little bit further and look at 3 children who have different kinds of disability and to look at those statements in the light of these children. The first child I'd like to introduce you to is Paul. He has a learning difficulty as a result of a genetic condition called Down syndrome. When he was a baby, he had a heart condition that required surgery. Since that time, he's been healthy and is strong and energetic. He has some health needs, as any child does, and some screening needs to be done because of his genetic condition. He also has difficulty with speech and making himself understood, so he needs to go to speech therapy. Currently, he is attending the local school. Although he has difficulty in learning, he manages well because his teacher adapts her teaching in the classroom so that he can learn at his own pace. He has many friends at school and is happy to go there. Now that you look back at the statements that you agreed with or disagreed with, think about them in the light of the 3 children that we have just talked about. Do you still agree with what you said then? Perhaps you realize that things are a little bit more complicated than you thought originally.